Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Rausch. I'm your own personal sales maven here to offer you tips and strategies and techniques to master your sales conversations. All right, today we're going to be talking about the truth about concessions. And this really is about how to adjust pricing in a way that is aligned with your values without feeling like you're being taken advantage of. Now, before you go any further in this episode, I want to give a little quick note here. This conversation is likely to challenge some of the business advice that you have heard and or already paid for. This is really specific to the more rigid pricing rules that a lot of people out there like to give, coaches out to give. You hear this stuff repeated online, and so here's one that will give you an indicator. If you're somebody who says often and or feels deep within yourself, you have to charge your worth, then this episode may not be for you. Okay. So I just want to put that out there before I go any further in the episode for you so you can decide that this may be one you choose to skip. Now, if you're still listening, here is who this episode is for. It's really for the person who has tried to apply this rule or these rules that they hear around pricing, around negotiating, around just overall how to run your business, but yet you still feel like you're bumping up against this friction of real human relationships and understanding that they just don't really fit some of these slogans that we often hear. Charge your worth, stand in your worth. And uh so if that has ever felt out of alignment for you, about how you need to run your business or how you should show up in the world, and if you're somebody who genuinely wants to get it right, but hasn't really understood why it didn't really fit for you or hasn't seemed to fit for you, then you're in the right place. This episode is likely for you. All right. Here is why I chose to record this particular episode. It came from a conversation that I had pretty recently with a client um, who was genuinely shocked and curious around my decision to make a pretty significant concession for her and I to keep working together. Um, and she just really didn't understand why I would do it and just genuinely wanted to understand my thought process behind it. Now, this is something I have talked about before, but maybe haven't put into an episode. I've had many a conversations with private clients, and I'm always happy to share my thought process around things, and my kind of the things that go into my ability to make decisions, like what are the factors that I weigh in. And so in case this is something that you wonder about, not my thinking, but this idea of making a concession, when to make them, when not to, um, how does that align up with all the business advice, that the gurus are saying out there that you're hearing online, all the memes that want to tell you, how, you know, how you should be and how you should think. Um, this may offer you some wiggle room. This may offer you some breathing room. I always say wiggle room. That's just kind of my term, but sometimes it's just nice to know that there are people out there who think about things a little bit maybe different, maybe a little bit of a sidestep to what you kind of are hearing over and over again. Um, I always find it's reassuring to find somebody when I feel like everybody's doing this, but that doesn't line up with me or that doesn't feel right. It always feels nice to find somebody who has a little bit of a different approach, something that gives me permission. I know I've talked about this many times on the podcast, but also in my career, and in the course of running Sales Maven that many, many years ago, I was very disillusioned, and feeling like maybe this this entrepreneur journey is not for me because I was seeing the way people were running their businesses and the way they were showing up at their events and the way they were showing up with their customers that felt really out of alignment with like my value system. And I thought, well, if that's how you have to be, if that's what you have to do, like maybe this isn't for me. And then thank goodness one of my great friends introduced me to Natalie Ekdahl. And I've told this story to her. I've told this story on the podcast, but watching her do it in a different way, watching her show up in a way that felt more aligned for me, in that it was very client focused. It wasn't the Natalie show. It was really the like she's there to be of service. I always felt like she made her clients kind of the focus and the star, and that felt, it felt so good to me. And so when my client brought this conversation into our session the other day of like, and I wish like I could give you kind of a snapshot of the body language and like the shock, and just her like, I really don't understand this decision that you made, Nikki. It feels so counterintuitive to everything that all of my coaches have ever shared and anybody I've ever learned from. And it feels so different. And I just don't understand why you said yes to this. And so again, this is why I'm recording this episode. If you've ever felt that way, um, about this particular topic, then I'm hoping that what you take away from this particular episode is that there are ways for you to do things differently. There are, and it's okay for you to give yourself permission. You don't need anybody else's permission to do things that are more aligned with who you are. And I think when you do that, it helps you attract the right people. It helps you make room in your business for the clients that you're going to feel the best about serving and that you're most excited to show up with, and it keeps that like passion for the work that you do alive versus trying to fit yourself into a box that just doesn't really, like, it just doesn't fit. Like, we're not all meant to wear the same thing and do the same thing and say the same thing. So again, this is why I'm sharing this particular episode. And I hope that in the end, if nothing else, it just gives you a little bit of like some insight that you should trust your instincts and your gut and what really fits for you. So again, context of this particular conversation was this idea that there are times where, in order to continue to earn somebody's business, you may make a concession. Now, the concession may be a price concession, the concession may be around the offer in some way. It may, it may be in the way the client works with you or the way you work with the client. And again, I just feel like there's just a lot of information out there, with good intent of people saying like, stand in your value, don't ever make a price concession, don't negotiate about your offers. And I know that the reason that people often say these things is, they are trying to advocate for you, although sometimes I think it's a little bit virtual signaling, frankly. Um, it's like, well, that's what everybody says, so must be true. But realistically, like, relationships aren't simple, and sales is it's a relationship. And so oversimplifying, it feels too rigid for me. And yeah, and just not every conversation is going to be the same. Not every client relationship is going to be the same. And yes, it's so great to have processes. And yes, it's so great to have standardized pricing. And yes, it's so much easier when things are just like boom, boom, boom. This is what we do, 1, 2, 3. And again, with relationships, they're not simple and people bring nuances to it. So again, I'm going to get into the kind of the idea around it, but I think a lot of times concessions get a bad rap because people aren't thinking about the relationship, they're just thinking about the business. And sales is a relationship game, and that means there's other people involved. There's also this idea of that when you make a concession, you're going to be taken advantage of, and nothing is worse than feeling like you've been taken advantage of. I, I mean, I would agree with that one 100%. I do not like being taken advantage of. I don't like when I feel like people are trying to take advantage of me and I have to take a hard line and, you know, be really like aggressively rude sometimes to people to say like, no, 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 like you've now crossed the line. I will do it. I prefer not to, but yeah, nobody wants to be taken advantage of. So I understand that idea. But there's also this idea, I think sometimes with concessions is that it's it's thought as a weakness, like, "Oh, you're being weak by doing this." And I don't know if that's what my client was showing up and, like, wondering, like, "Oh, maybe Nikki's not as strong as I thought she was," or I don't know. But again, I'm just gonna share kind of my thought process around this, some decisions that I think are important that go into making a concession. But the idea here is really to reframe this, is that a concession can also be a thoughtful decision, an intentional decision, a values aligned decision. And that is what I want you to think about here. If and when you find yourself in this place of wondering, should I make a concession for this relationship to continue on? Um, what are the things that I need to think about ahead of time? So for me, I always have criteria, right? Like knowing this ahead of time makes making a concession so much easier and it makes the decision faster, frankly. So these are things that you can think about now just in case that this, a situation were to arise sometime in the near future. um, what are your criteria? So for me, a lot of times if I'm going to make a concession around an offer, a price, or something for a client, I I need these are my criteria. Okay. So one is the person that I'm making a concession has to have expressed a real desire to invest in learning what it is that I teach, right? Because I do think that what I'm doing is teaching. Um, I don't really like to identify myself as a teacher, but there is this idea of like, I am teaching strategy and technique. And if somebody is invested in learning it, then I'm so in. That's like that already becomes like, check. Chances are they're well on their way to getting a concession if it's needed. Now, the second thing is this person has to show up and participate fully. And if they have demonstrated that to me, then I may be more willing to make a concession. So sometimes early in a relationship, what are the ways that you know? Like, does the person show up on time for your meetings? Do they reschedule things at the last minute? Now, again, people have emergencies, make concessions for those too. Like show some flexibility because, life gets in the way. But if it's something where they're very slow to respond or they show up late and don't really have any reason, it's just kind of like, yeah, here I am. Like, let's get started. And you're like, I've been waiting for 10 minutes, which by the way is my maximum wait time. I will not wait for anybody for more than 10 minutes before I leave. Um, and that was something that I started that in college and have continued on, you know, to this day. Um, and most people I will only wait 5 minutes for. But that's like, do they show up on time? Like, that's important to me. That's one of my criterias. Do they show up and are they ready to participate? And then the next thing is, have they clearly articulated why, like their reason for asking for the concession? And once given, do they then express gratitude for this concession? Do they understand? Do they show that they have some level of understanding that this is outside of the norm and therefore there's some gratitude and appreciation? Um, because that I feel like without that, that is where it starts to get into this like feeling like you're being taken advantage of. So if those three things are met for me, that is a signal that, okay, maybe, or often, yes, I'm willing to make a concession here for this particular person in this particular instance because they meet my criteria. So if you're interested in this idea of concessions, think about what your criteria is. Come up with this for yourself. Know this ahead of time so that you can then, think back. Like for me, showing up on time and, being consistent, like have they demonstrated that? Or, have they even had the opportunity to demonstrate it? Maybe not yet, but, like notice that. Um, but, you know, come up with your criteria. Now, the next thing is this is something I always ask myself before I make a concession for somebody is, will I feel any type of resentment delivering on whatever it is that we have agreed to? Like, will I feel resentful for, going and speaking at their event? Or will I feel resentful for, putting together a training that's outside of my norm and I'm not getting, paid full price for it? Or will I feel resentful that I'm allowing this person to work with me in a way that's a little bit different than my standard, Zoom sessions and Voxer access, right? Like notice those things. And if my answer is yes, that I feel a little like there's like a little niggling. It's almost like an itch, like, oh, I feel like I might need to scratch that. That usually means no, I shouldn't make the concession because that's a boundary for me. Like I don't want to do things that I feel resentful about. I'm just not interested in having any resentments in my life. And I know for the things that I have struggled and felt resentful for, like it's so much work, right? To get to a place of letting that stuff go. Like it's just too much work to put myself in a position to add any more resentment of things I need to work through. So again, these are my criteria. What are yours? Now, another thing is I always ask is there a mutual benefit? Like obviously there's a benefit for this person because they're getting the concession that they've expressed that they want, but is there an opportunity for there to be a win in this for me as well? Like that makes it a much easier yes. So, for instance, some examples that I look at as being a benefit is this going to result in a long-term relationship? Like if this is a one and done engagement, the answer is probably no to any type of concession. But if there's opportunity for additional work together, then that may be a yes. Or is this something where it's going to allow me to practice and or learn a new skill, then maybe that's my win out of this. So I would challenge you to think about what would a win be for you? Don't just make one up. Like you need to feel some level of excitement about the win too. I know I've talked about this before of this idea of I really do look at my client relationships in lifetime value. So I'm not really that interested in one and done interactions with people. I'll take them, but there's probably not going to be any kind of concession around a one and done thing, right? If somebody wants to do one strategy session with me and never any more, like they're probably going to pay full freight for that. Or if somebody wants me to, come in and do some work in their group, or with their team in some way, but it's like a one-time thing, again, there's probably not any kind of concession there. Unless, again, is there a learning opportunity? Does this offer me an opportunity to develop a new training in some way that I can then repurpose? So, this is my thought process. What's yours? And if you haven't thought about this yet, again, this is what this episode is for, is to challenge you to think about what kind of things are going to be a win for you so that you know whether or not you should make any kind of concession. Now, here's another thing to think about is structuring the concession and having some boundaries and parameters around it. For instance, how long is the concession for? Is it forever, for life, or is it a one-time concession, or is it for a limited time concession? Make sure you put those things into that agreement with somebody. Make sure that there's clarity about the deliverables. And this is really just making sure that you're maintaining your integrity and you're living up to the commitment, that what the client's expectations are, and that they're living up to yours as well. Even if it's a discount, I always say, like, I have no problem with giving discounts, but there needs to be a win back for me. Like, there needs to be, if I'm gonna offer a discount, I have to get something in return. Otherwise, I'm just leaving money on the table. So if you're thinking about that type of thing, is like, what's the win for you? I remember years ago, there was a really pretty prestigious organization in the Seattle area. And they had multiple properties. They wanted me to come in and do a training, and they had a very limited budget. And I had quoted my original price. They came back and said, "Oh, that's outside of our budget." You know, we, I think the person I was working with even took it to like her CEO, and they said, like, this is the budget. And so what I just asked for was, well, if you're willing to commit to hiring me for 3 trainings, then I will do it at that price, which they immediately said yes. Now, originally they were just going to hire me for 1 training, right? So don't be afraid. This is getting into this negotiations. Um, but that's okay. When somebody's asking you for concession, you can ask for something in return. What is going to be the win for you? Um, Now, here's another thing that I want to comment on about concessions, that this is also an indicator for me as to whether or not this is a good fit client, is that sometimes I'll get asked for a concession for, again, could be about price, could be about time, could be about offer, any of that. And then I agree with, and ask for a commitment back, and then the person backs out. Now, that is a no-go. When they come back later and say, "Oh, now I'm ready. Can we start to renegotiate again?" The answer for me is no. Because for me personally, my thought process is that's an integrity issue. So if you've asked me for a concession, I've agreed to it, and then you back away, totally fine. Like, bless and release, I'll wish you well, but you won't get any kind of concession again from me. That's not going to be on the table, because you've already shown to me that if you ask for what you want and I give it to you, and really give it to you what you asked for. And then what I ask for in return is a pretty logical next step. And you say no, and there's no like back and forth, then that was just that. Those are the times where I do feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And I don't like that feeling, as I don't think most of us do, right? I don't know how you feel about it, but I really hate to feel like I'm taken advantage of. I hate to feel manipulated. Um, it's one of those things, like, I teach all these ways to stay in rapport with people and communicate with people in a positive way. And I teach it based on my foundation background in neurolinguistic programming. There is nothing more insulting to me than somebody to say, like, "Oh, I know what you're doing, Nikki. Like, you're using your NLP on me." Like, that feels so insulting, right? Like, this idea that I'm being manipulative. Um, like it's such an insult, even though I think that person is trying to like say, I think maybe they're trying to say, like, look at me, I understand you, but that doesn't feel like understanding. So again, from a concession standpoint, is like, am I going to feel good about the relationship? Am I going to feel good about um, showing up and being the most genuine, authentic version of myself that I can possibly be in these moments? If I'm feeling like this person is thinking I'm doing something to them or trying to be like sneaky in some way, like those things don't feel good either. So again, know these things about yourself so that you can easily identify whether or not a concession makes sense for you. Um yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to say about this. The thing about a concession is it really only works when both sides honor the agreement. And when you find yourself having made a concession for somebody and they back away or they slip out of integrity, it does give you feedback, right? Like there is a lesson there for you to learn. Like maybe the boundary needed to be more clear. Should you make some type of a concession around this in the future for somebody else, not this person who's out of integrity because they're now like kicked to the curb in my opinion, but like look for the lessons and look for the clarity here. The idea isn't to over accommodate. It is really to think about what is the win for both of us here. And also, if you're feeling guilty about making concessions because the gurus are telling you not to, like, I hope what you take away from this episode too is like, you don't need to feel guilty for making decisions that feel aligned with you. Some of my best client relationships have started out with me showing some flexibility. This truly does speak to my favorite quote, which is blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. Like my goal, one of my biggest goals in life is to not be bent out of shape, to offer flexibility. And sometimes that flexibility shows up as a concession. So if that aligns with you in some way, please give yourself this permission to think about what's the benefit of the concession for you? Is it lifetime value that you're thinking about? Is it retention? Is it stability in having business come in? This was part of the conversation the other day with the client around, I don't get overly precious about about money, and I try not to let my ego get in the way. So this idea of like charge your worth, like I know there are coaches that make so much more money than I do. And I'm also really grateful every day for the clients that I get to work with. And could I take a hard line? Could I increase my prices? Could I do this? Could I probably like maybe um but is that the priority for me? No. Like, know what your priorities are. Like, my priorities are to support my family, and that is important, and to be able to pay my team. Those are like the 2 things, right? And then but really it's about the work for me. It's about delivering on the work. It's about working with people who are able to implement the things that I teach, and then they go out and feel a really deep sense of success around, bringing revenue into their business. Like that feels like the biggest, most important win and feels like I'm doing the work I'm supposed to do. Like those are more important to me than being the coach that's out there, you know, being offended or being precious if somebody says to me, I really want to work with you and I just cannot swing this because of this reason or that reason. And do you have any flexibility? Like if I can make it work, and again, they have these things that meet my criteria, chances are I'm going to try to do that for them. Um, and that feels like a win to me. Like I'd rather come from a place of generosity. I'm not saying that that needs to be your thought process. I'm just, again, sharing insight into mine. Um, so make sure, again, when you make a concession, that you are clear about the boundaries, you're clear about the timeline, you're clear about the expectations so that you both can feel really good about it. So, one of the brilliant things I think about this entrepreneurial journey, about having my own business, is that I get to make these decisions. Decisions that, for so many years, I used to have to go and learn. I had to learn how to manage my manager so that I could create wins for myself and for my clients. And I did do that. And it was a lot of work. Like, frankly, one of the companies I worked for, I was their top producing rep in North America, and I was bringing in millions and millions of dollars. I think my territory usually did somewhere in the like 30 to $35 million a year for this company. And those were my sales, right? And there were times where I had to go and like manage my manager to get the things that were needed, the concessions that were needed in order to, close the deal, in order to keep the relationship, the client relationship in good standing, because something went wrong that was outside of my control or whatever. I know I've shared some of these stories in the podcast in the past, but now having my own business that I don't have to go and manage a manager, such a relief, right? Like, yes, I wrestle with decisions, but like it feels like such a privilege than having to have a boss who is saying whether or not I can make any kind of a concession. So again, this is where I don't get overly precious about it. And maybe it's because I had the many, many years of negotiating with a boss around this, or having to negotiate with a boss. Um, Man, I had a boss whose instant response to everything was always no. Like, his first response to anything you asked him for, it didn't really matter what it was no, unless it was like, "Can we have beer?" Like, "Is it beer drinking time?" Then it was a yes, but it was always a no, and learning how to, like, work through the conversation to get to the place where at the end of the conversation, he would always then explain to me how to structure the deal to close it. That was always the thing that I started with, right? Like, learning how to have those conversations so that he felt really good about his decision to help me close a deal versus his first reaction was always no. Like, learning how to do that was such great practice, and like working that through in my head of like, where did the conversation need to go? How did I need to show up in the conversation? When did I need to pause? When did I need to, what other evidence did I need to have? I think those things have helped, that I could bring that into my own business now, and I have to work those conversations with myself, right? Of like making the ultimate decision around things, but man, it's such a privilege. I feel so grateful to get to do this work, uh, and that I don't have a boss to manage me. Although I actually do like to be managed. I sometimes wish my team would manage me more, um, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, concessions. As we bring this to a close, remember, you are the CEO of your business. You get to decide what aligns for you, what feels right for you, and make sure you protect yourself. But don't get so caught up in this idea of being precious about money, about your worth, about your program and the way you designed it. Like, being overly precious, I think a lot of times is it's ego, and or it's trying to do it right because somebody told you that's the right way to do it. Do it what feels right for you. And if you need some support around it, please reach out. I'm here to support you, and I'm here to cheer you on. And thank you for listening all the way to the end of this episode. As always, I'm just so grateful that you're here. And if you know somebody right now who would benefit from listening to this particular episode, would you please share it with an encouraging word to them about what you appreciate about them and why you think this particular episode may be of value. Actually ask them, would this episode be of value to you? And then share it. All right. Thanks for listening. I'm wishing you continued success. Have a great rest of your day.